Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. And as you can probably tell, today's story time a little different. I recently competed in the Battle Spirits Saga Grand Open in Columbus, Ohio, and I just wanted to kind of put my thoughts out there on how things went, talk about the deck that I brought and played, and go over my card choices, and just kind of summarize my whole experience at that awesome event, because I met a ton of cool people there. A lot of them recognized me from Arcanum and from doing Magic content, but a lot of people said I would subscribe if you did some more Battle Spirits Saga content. So that's what we're trying out here today. Just something kind of informal, unscripted, off the top of my head, my very bald head. We're going to have some fun looking at the deck list that I brought and just kind of talking about my whole experience there in Ohio. First, before I show you the deck, I just want to be very clear in that this event was awesome. It was a lot of fun. I have never really played in a big competitive event before. I've played Magic for probably close to 25 years now, but I usually just stick to pre-releases and FNMs, and when I went to Philly for MagicCon, I did some of the events there, but nothing that had 300 plus people playing in it, which is what I faced in Ohio. So this was a really big event. I was a little nervous going into it, but everyone I met was super chill and loved to talk about the game and where they're from, and just kind of gushed about how great of a time that they were having. The venue itself was a little warm. We had some air conditioning problems. It was kind of crowded and stuffy, and things run long. If you're not used to playing in a 9-round tournament, it's exhausting, and so it did take a toll. I made some mistakes during my gameplay, and I finished with a record of 4-5 after 9 rounds. That put me in about 177th place overall, out of 350 some odd. So right in the middle of the pack, which I think was pretty good for being my first ever competitive Battle Spirits Saga event. I am inspired to do better in future events, but I'm also very glad I did not end up like dead last. I was mortified that I would show up and win nothing and be like bottom person. I would have gone home and cried if that had happened. But fortunately, I did fine. And every game was very close. Like, I felt like I had a chance to win virtually every match. And I didn't lose because of bad luck, unlike, again, not to rip on Magic all the time, but in that game, you can draw too many lands or not enough lands, and you don't really get to do what you're there to do, and those losses always feel terrible. That doesn't really happen in Battle Spirits. Every time you make a play, every time you draw a card, it's a live card, and your choices on how you use your cores and your resources, it's really all up to you. And I fully understand and admit I played bad at some points, made bad choices, and so the outcome is what I deserved. I don't think I got lucky or unlucky. I think I just played as best as I could with the deck that I brought, and that was enough to get me to a 4-5. When you look at this deck list, I think you'll see that it has potential to do better in the hands of a better pilot. Maybe you could have made it higher up, and indeed, the top 16 had decks that were similar to what I brought. They were off by 5 or 8 cards, maybe. So some differences in choices there. But, between how I decided to sideboard or how I decided to, overextend into certain strategies and got punished for it, everything was like my own choice. So I own up to that. But it was such a good time regardless. I really had so much to take in and so much to give out. I handed out tokens and I took pictures and had a really awesome time connecting with fans and people who are excited about this game. So with all of that in mind, let's take a look at the deck that I brought and kind of go through card by card and see why I wound up in the middle of the pack in Ohio. So here we go. All right, so I call this deck Pentan's Fables. It is a yellow fabled beasts variant, I guess we can say. And so there's kind of like a core group of fabled beasts that I kind of started with. and made some changes and choices and even injected a little bit of spice here. So let's take a look more closely here. The core of the deck really comes down to the two blessed boys. We've got Hippo at 3, and we've got Dual Eagle at 5. So both of these spirits have the blessed ability, which says place a core from the void into your life when this spirit's attack reduces your opponent's life. So if you ever hit your opponent with either the Hippo or the Eagle, you gain life. It is kind of hard to gain life in Battle Spirit Saga at the moment with just the one set and the promo series to work with. And these are the only two blessed spirits in the game as of right now. That said, I think it's a really strong ability because anytime you gain life, you're also really ramping yourself. Those cores eventually get knocked out of your life and added to your reserve where you can spend them on other stuff. So you're kind of offsetting, usually when you damage your opponent, their life drops into their reserve and you're ramping them. You're getting that too. You're closing that gap. So gaining life in Battle Spirits is also a form of ramp or acceleration, which makes it a very powerful ability. Probably why they only gave us 2 cards that do it in the first set, because you could run away with this. And so my plan was stick the Eagle, stick the Hippo, use those as my main attackers, and try to kind of swarm and use the rest of the Fabled Beasts to get in the last necessary few points of damage once I had a healthy lead. So if your deck was only 8 cards and it was 4 Hippos and 4 Eagles, you'd be in great spot, but that's not enough to get the job done. So starting with 4 and 4 of those, where do we go next? And I tried to deliberately only add cards that synergized with what was already in the deck or would improve my chances of drawing what was already in the deck. So in my mind, I started with 4 Eagle, 4 Hippo. Those are 2 cards I definitely want to run, and I want the full number possible. So both of them happen to be Fabled Beasts, which is great because then you get to add in 4 Flying Turtle, another Fabled Beast. When summoned, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a Fabled Beast spirit, add it to your hand. If not, discard it. So, again, in theory, if your deck was only 12 cards, 4 Flying Turtles, 4 Hippos, and 4 Eagles, it would have a 100% hit rate on the turtle. You would always draw another card. So adding just those turtles would make your deck better. You've now added a way to draw more of your deck, which is great. Card advantage is wonderful, even in a game like Battle Spirits. Unfortunately, anything you add past this point starts to either dilute the efficiency of your turtles or get you further away from landing your blessed beaters. So we have to start making some concessions. But overall, those are I would say the 3 most important cards in the deck, and they're all Fabled Beasts. So at this point, we're kind of already in the Fabled Beasts stable. And so that kind of influenced where the deck went from here. We start looking at other Fabled Beasts that can also be hit by the turtle. So we get stuff like Gem Beast Carbulk. It's a vanilla spirit, doesn't have any fancy abilities, but it is notable because we can cast this one pretty cheap if we've got 2 other yellow reductions already in play. Being able to drop another spirit without investing a ton of cores feels great. Now, the downside here is that for just 1 core, you're only a 3000 BP, and that is in the danger zone for Burning Force and Angelic Pressure and all the stuff that hits 3Ks and below. So after playing with this card, it is essential for keeping up the density of Fabled Beasts, but I don't love it because it feels like a trap. You're like, oh, I get to play this one for pretty cheap. I only need 1 core and 1 on it. It's an affordable body, but then it dies really easily unless you do spend that extra core anyway, just to get it up to the 4K BP and out of the danger zone. So I don't love the Carbulk. I'm hoping that there are more Fabled Beasts at or around this price point in future sets to kind of break us up here, but that's a necessary inclusion at the moment. Similarly, up at 4, we've got Gale Yale. This one is above that crucial 3K BP mark, and it's another Fabled Beast. So if your deck was just Flying Turtle, Gem Beast, Hippocampo, Gale Yale, and Dual Eagle, you're still hitting 100% of the time on your Flying Turtle. That's not bad. And you've got a nice curve, good arrangement of reductions there. You could play your Eagle, pretty cheaply. It's normally 5. You can get that down to 2. and you'd have a good time. But those cards alone do not make a whole deck. So where else can we squeeze in some more stuff to do? Well, if you've got turtles, you can add Eravata, right? That's another Fabled Beast. And this one, when it's destroyed, you can select a spirit that costs 2 from your trash and summon it. So we have a neat little interaction. Turtle finds us Eravata. Eravata brings back a dead turtle, which then gets to be summoned again and hopefully find you another Fabled Beast. He only works with stuff that costs 2, and this deck ended up not having a ton of those, so I only played 3 Eravata. And there were times where it was on board and I didn't have anything in my trash for it to bring back. I probably could have gone down to just 2 copies of this guy. The only other 2-drop I ended up running was Pentan. He's really good, even though he's not a Fabled Beast. I think it was still worth including him. Almost every yellow deck does. He reduces the cost of the first magic card you use each turn by 1, and as we'll see in a moment, we're splashing some off-color magic, so getting those reductions really helps. You do have to core him up quite a bit to get him above 3k, but most people, if they want him off the board, they're going to find a way to do it anyway, so I try not to give them an easy Burning Force target, but sometimes you can't avoid it. He is still worth running, even though he's our first non-Fabled Beast. So he does dilute the efficiency of our turtle ever so slightly, but still, this first row of spirits feels pretty strong. You got the turtle, Pentan, Eravata, Gem Beast, Hippo Campo, Gale Yale, Dual Eagle. Those guys alone give you plenty to do. They give you the life gain, they give you the reductions, you get some recursion, as we like to call it, between turtle, Eravata, back to turtle again. That's a pretty good foundation to build the rest of the deck. And from there, it just becomes a question of where do we want to go next? Well, I have been trying to get my head around nexuses, right? Coming from other games like Magic, where your lands are really important, nexuses kind of fill a similar space to non-basic lands, but it is hard as a new player to understand how important like a reduction symbol on board that doesn't tie up a core can be. Like, in a way, this is like ramp or fixing or whatever word we want to use for it. I feel like every deck probably needs at least one nexus that it can count on having out there just to kind of take some of the burden off of your cores every turn. Fabled Beasts happen to have a wonderful nexus with Phantasmal Paradise. It costs 4 to get out, so you could play that on your very first turn and pass, which is often what I ended up doing in this tournament. And it says, during your main step, whenever you summon a Fabled Beast Spirit, you may exhaust this nexus to draw a card. So, it itself is not a Fabled Beast. If you reveal this off the top of your deck while playing a turtle, feels kind of bad because you don't get to draw it. It's the first real card, aside from Pentan, that actively makes your turtle worse, except if you play the turtle while this is already out, you get to draw a second card off of the turtle, regardless of if it's able to hit something on its summon ability or not. And that feels really good. It also works with every other Fabled Beast in your deck, and we've got a lot of them, so it turns virtually every Fabled Beast, at least the first one you play each turn, into what we would call a cantrip, or a self-replacing spirit. It's a card that immediately draws you another card, and that is crucial for your velocity. It lets you dig through your deck faster, lets you maintain a board, lets you rebuild after getting hit by a board wipe, like a Burning Force or Exhaust Nexus or something, Baculist, Cursed Dragon combo. All of these things can really set the yellow deck back, and so being able to quickly chain spirits into other spirits can help you bounce back from those kinds of setbacks. So Phantasmal Paradise, great inclusion. It ended up being the only Nexus I ran. I've seen other versions of this deck also put in the Cathedral card. For me, that just didn't seem to do enough. I didn't want to trade off my spirits to get the cores, and by the time I was able to invest cores on it to get card draw off of that, it just felt like I would rather spend those cores elsewhere. So I didn't put any other Nexuses in here. I really wanted to keep as many turtle targets as possible in the deck, and that meant kind of cutting back on some other places. So that was our only Nexus, was Phantasmal Paradise. Up in the top end, we've got a few other Fabled Beasts as well to kind of help us out. God Beast Behemoth. So he is a Fabled Beast. He can be found by turtle, and he'll draw you another card when you have your Nexus out. And mostly, I wanted this guy for the stats. Yellow has trouble kind of getting big bodies out there to wrestle with the bigger white spirits or even some of the bigger red ones. So having a 3-core cost 11,000 BP is strong. It's helpful to have an attacker that you can just send in there and not worry about him getting killed very easily. Hitting the 6 reductions to get him on the board cheap, also pretty easy. We go wide easy enough. And there is the synergy with the 2-cost stuff. We didn't have a ton of those, but he could occasionally open up a hole for a Pentan or a Turtle or somebody to make an attack and not be blocked as well, or those guys in the trash would count their symbols towards his reductions too. So 3 felt like the right number to have, but I was almost always happy to draw a Behemoth, and maybe going up to 4 would have been wise as well. We've got a single copy of Phantom Beast King Lin, another Fabled Beast, kind of expensive, but plenty of reductions. And so when summoned, you get to select one of your opponent's spirits for each Fabled Beast spirit you control. They're treated as level 1 during this turn. So why do we have one of this guy in here? Well, if we go back to that eagle, at level 3, the eagle says during your attack step, your spirits with Blessed can't be blocked by your opponent's level 1 spirits. If you have an eagle out, or maybe an eagle and a hippo, and then you slam down King Lin, you make your opponent's board level 1, and then your blessed dudes basically get a free attack. That can be backbreaking, although oftentimes the opponent has an ice shield waiting and you'll only get 1 good attack out of it. But even so, just the threat of being able to suddenly have a wave of unblockable life-gaining attackers felt worth making room for, so I stuck in just 1 of Phantom Beast King Lin. Now, I've seen other versions of this deck use Baculus in this slot. The idea being you just rip all the cores off of everybody. That'll also put them down to level 1. But now we're doing off-color stuff that's kind of hard to do, and Baculus, once he's on the board, doesn't really do a whole lot. I'd rather have King Lin here, who's got kind of better stats and fits our Fabled Beast strategy. You can draw him with the turtle. He'll draw you a card with the Nexus. More synergy. I tried to have a deck with a high floor, maybe not as high of a ceiling. It couldn't do some of the impressive, super backbreaking stuff that some other decks can do, but I wanted every card to at least meet like a minimum threshold for effectiveness, and keeping as many Fabled Beasts in here as possible worked for me. I mean, over on the sides, I think you can see Fabled Beasts. There's total 25 of them. Out of a 50-card deck, that means your turtle has a 50-50 chance of drawing you an extra card anytime you summon it, which is really good. The only other spirit in here that I managed to squeeze in was 2 copies of Wonderland Alice. She also does well on a wide board. She gets to reduce something by 1,000 BP, and she becomes effectively unkillable if you've got enough other spirits out there, so she is just a nice, resilient card. Unfortunately, not a Fabled Beast, doesn't super fit with what else we're doing, but the versatility of being able to attack and pick off something, or to sit there as a solid blocker that doesn't really die, it was worth making room for her as well. I was almost always happy to draw or find one of my Alices, and sometimes she was the out I needed to draw to punch through a difficult board. So overall, the spirit package I was really happy with. We had the blessed guys to gain us life. We had some vanillas in there, mostly to fill gaps where needed. We had the nice little synergy between Turtle and Ervita, and being able to kind of force our opponent to have level 1 spirits with King Lin. A lot of good stuff working there. Over on the magic package, we've got 2 copies of Angelic Pressure. This is great with Pentan, or once you get 2 other spirits on the board, you can fire this off pretty cheap. It's a nice little combat trick. It's a good way to pick off annoying spirits that otherwise might not get involved in battle that you need to clear out for whatever reason. But at the same time, not a lot of stuff dies to 3k anymore. People tend to know to play around this and keep their spirits 4,000 or above, so you sometimes have to combine this with combat or damage in a way to get where you need to be. So you don't want too many of these clogging up your hand, but 2 felt like the right number. I had 1 absolute ice shield, and I know that this is like the most popular card and everyone's got to have 4 ice shields. I only own 1. It happens to be my 4 influencer ice shield, which is really cool, and not many people have those. But that kind of gave me room to play with some other stuff. I go back and forth on Ice Shield more than any other card in the game right now. Sometimes it feels amazing and you freeze out your opponent's attack and you get to hit them back and you win the game that you would have otherwise lost. Sometimes you're already being aggressive and you just need one more spirit to go wide enough or to press the attack or whatever, or punish your opponent for overextending. And then you draw this and it doesn't really help you at all. Again, this felt like a card with a really high ceiling, but also a low floor. When it does nothing, it does nothing for you. And there are often times where I would draw even my one copy of Ice Shield and I would say, man, I wish this was a turtle, or man, I wish this was Air Vita so I could block and then get back a turtle or something. So I am still up in the air on Ice Shield. I know that a lot of people swear by it and they assume every deck needs 4 copies, but I tried just one. But I did run some other burst tricks, which I think a lot of people in Ohio didn't see coming. In fact, many opponents after our games complimented me on my ingenuity here. For, in addition to the 1 Ice Shield, I did 3 copies of Burst Venom, which is a burst magic. So we would set that in the burst zone. Most opponents would assume it was just another Ice Shield. But this one works a little differently. So when opponent destroys your spirit, you get to select 1 spirit, remove all but 1 core from it, and place them into their owner's reserve. You may then pay the extra to kick this and give something plus 2k BP. Never did that. I never hard cast this from my hand, so the fact that it's purple, largely irrelevant. I always set this as my burst. And then I got to play mind games with my opponent. My favorite trick here is I suicide an attack in with a turtle or a gem beast or something small. Opponent blocks and kills my, little pawn. I get to flip this up and strip all of the cores off of their much bigger spirit. And, oh, by the way, with just 1 core on there, now your big spirit is only a level 1, and it can't block my eagle or my hippo anymore, and suddenly I'm going over the top of you. That always felt really good. Alternatively, against, say, a white deck that uses the elephant, Nurengard, they would often level up that elephant because at max level, you get an extra refresh step after your attacks. So they figure I can attack with the elephant. No matter what happens, I'll get to untap it and get all my cores back. And so I would let them attack. And again, chump block with a turtle or whatever. Reveal my burst venom. Strip all the cores off the elephant. So now at the end of the attack step, it's only level 1. You don't get your free refresh anymore, and now you don't have any defense that you were counting on, and now my yellow spirits can charge in there and steal the game. So it was a fun trick to use, but going forward, I don't know if I can count on that. I mean, everyone at my local store has seen me pull this off now, so they kind of know to play around it. But maybe it'll work at your locals. I thought that it was pretty clever, and it worked well with what the deck was trying to do. And if you're on a budget and cannot afford a full playset of Ice Shields, try Burst Venom. It fills a similar role, and at the very least, people will assume that you have an Ice Shield tucked under there. We've got 1 copy of Suppression. I didn't love this card either. I think the one time I played it, it was on an opponent's Maduke to buff up their Maduke so it wouldn't die when it wrestled with my God Beast, and I wouldn't have to suffer Blood Curse. Not an excellent play, but it kept me alive another turn. The best thing you could probably do with this Suppression is use it on Alice, because if she's got enough cores on her already, and if your board is stable enough already, you create an unkillable blocker, that can block while exhausted, and every time they attack into her, you just add a core to her or something like that. Didn't come up super often, so I might cut this or change it for something else going forward. It felt a little too situational to really be worth running, especially in an aggressive deck. Wasn't my favorite card. 2 Burning Force, you pretty much have to have these. You got to answer opposing nexuses. You need a way to keep the board under control, especially against purple, stuff like Camelot Knight or something small but has curse that you just don't want to lose a whole spirit to. You can kind of pick off a couple of little guys with the Burning Force. So 2 of those, and 2 Dream Bomb, same idea. You need a way to answer instead of multiple little things if they're pouring a lot of cores onto one big thing. Maduke, for example, or Elephant that you just don't want to kill and give them 3 cards for. this can get you out of a lot of tricky situations. It is expensive, it's off color. Pentan really helps get it down to a manageable 4 cost instead of 5. But otherwise, we don't want to be holding too many of these. So 2 Burning Force, 2 Dream Bomb. One card that we do always want to see pretty much is Exhaust Nexus. 4 copies of this. Very easy to get this down into like 2, 3, maybe 4 core cost. Reducing all of your opponent's spirits by 3000 BP as a flash can wreck combat for your opponent. And this one, so many people forget that you can set this as a burst, and when your opponent resolves a Spirit's When Summon effect, you get to flip it up and they get minus 1000 BP for each Nexus they control. Purple is really, really popular right now. Purple has a lot of spirits with When Summoned effects on them, and they happen to play a good number of Nexuses, stuff like Underworld Depths and Rotting Swamp or whatever. So it was pretty common for them to slam down a spirit and be like, oh, hey, I get to draw a card with this guy, Aglavale or Cavalier, whichever one. And you go, oh, hold on a second. Draw your card. But now that has resolved, boom, you've got 3 Nexuses in play. Everything gets minus 3000. And then, hey, I'm going to pay the other 3 cores. And now all of your stuff is minus 6,000. Like, that is a huge blowout against purple. So this was the best way to match up against purple. A little less effective against some of the other colors. But even so, just the fact that we can threaten this during combat or whatever, super useful. So that was the core 50-card deck. Mostly Fabled Beasts. The idea to land our Hippo, land our Dual Eagle, hit in, gain some life, use that to buy time to find Alice or King Lin or God Beast, and keep the pressure on. Our tricks were mostly in removing cores with Burst Venom, or bouncing big stuff out of the way with Dream Bomb, or Exhaust Nexus to kind of clear things up. That was the strategy. It worked well enough most of the time. Again, it was a 2-day-long tournament. Day 1 was 7 rounds, and I finished that 4-3, so I was feeling really good at the end of day 1. Next day was 2 more rounds, and for whatever reason, maybe I didn't sleep well, didn't drink enough coffee. I just made some sloppy mistakes in those 2 games, and my opponents were on the ball, and I ended up losing both of those back-to-back, so that set me at 4-5. But again, in the hands of a better pilot, I like this deck. It is consistent. You got, again, I keep reiterating, but it is worth calling attention to. Paradise, Turtle, you are constantly drawing more cards, constantly rebuilding or expanding your board, and then you've got some little tricks in there to kind of control things between the Exhaust Nexus, Dream Bomb, Burning Force, a good variety of magic for a lot of different situations. However, it's a tournament against 350 some odd people. Everyone has their own strategy, so you need to have a side deck or sideboard to interact with all that as well. So my choices here also felt kind of inspired. I brought 2 copies of Heavenblade Dragon Ryut, it's another Fabled Beast. It costs 4. Usually I would just take out the 2 Gale Yale and put in 2 of this guy, particularly against Star Dragons, because during either main step, cores that would be placed into either player's life are placed on this spirit instead. So it stops Sigward Nova, right? They don't get to gain the life when they play him and spend their soul core and would refill after a big bang energy. This is supposed to kind of hedge you against those, but otherwise his stats are kind of weak, probably too weak to play normally. He is an answer card for a specific opposing strategy. Now note, it's only during main step, so he doesn't even help you in a mirror against other Fabled Beasts because the life gain that they're getting from their Eagle and Hippo is happening during the attack step, so he doesn't punish those. He really only answers, as far as I can tell, red Star Dragons. So I wasn't sure how popular that deck was going to be, but I had room in the side for 2 of him, so he came along. I think I sided him in. I did have 1 match against the Star Dragons opponent. They beat me anyway because I never drew this guy, and they got to go off with Nova, and then Nova attacks, and he destroys my entire board, and we don't talk about that. I had 2 copies of Black Lance in here, so this might be surprising, or maybe not, I don't know. A lot of times this Fabled Beast shell will find room for things like Enterprise and the Elephant, Newmangard. The Elephant is really strong. It is a big body. When it dies, under any circumstance, you get to draw 3 cards, which is quite a lot. My deck already was drawing plenty of cards from Turtle and the Paradise Nexus, so I wasn't too worried about that. But the idea of having a decently sized body with Curse would let me attack into Elephants or Enterprises or bigger things that maybe my Turtles couldn't get past, or I was struggling with. And when summoned, I could draw 2 cards off of this immediately. So that felt better than playing my own Elephant, where I would have had to wait for it to die to get a payoff there. I was on the more aggressive game plan. I wanted stuff that affected the board immediately. So I went with 2 copies of Black Lance. The idea was to side these in mostly against like mono white or somebody who's hoping to dream bomb me. Please dream bomb my Black Lance. I want to draw 2 more cards when I summon it again. And because of the way my deck, would get its own cores or ramp through life gain, getting to 6 cores and then 3 more for the level 2 summon was achievable. It wasn't outside the realm of possible. Especially, the Elephant is 8 plus minimum 1 on it, so that's also 9 cores as well. And you're paying 9 to get 3 cards later, or you could pay 9 to get 2 cards right now. That was my logic behind it, so I put in 2 Black Lance, but I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Was this a good idea? Was it a bad idea? I thought it was kind of clever. Feral slash. I would put this in mostly in the mirror match against other Fabled Beast or small yellow decks. The fact that it can kill something 3k BP or less when I lose life is fine. Not ideal. Obviously, we don't want to be taking damage, but in a race, Hippo against Hippo, fine. Your Hippo hits me, you gain a life, but now I get to destroy your underleveled Hippo, and now mine gets to attack, and I gain that back, and, we're off. It also can destroy Nexuses that cost 4 or fewer, which is everything yellow pretty much plays, so this would hit Cathedral if opponent had that, or it would hit their Paradise instead. So this would probably come in place of the Burning Forces, depending on the matchup. But I did have 2 more Burning Forces if I felt I really needed Nexus Removal or options against a board that went wide rather than tall. I would usually take out 2 Dream Bombs and bring in 2 more Burning Force. Or conversely, I had 2 more Dream Bombs, so if I was against a deck going tall rather than wide, out come the 2 Burning Force, in go the 2 more Dream Bomb for a full 4 Dream Bomb. So pretty flexible in the magic packages. We had answers for Nexuses, wide boards, tall boards, control with our own Black Lances to draw out of it. And against the Star Dragon combo, we had our own dragon to fight back there. But again, not a ton of experience playing in competitive events. I do my own local store Thursday nights. Some weeks I go 0-3, some weeks I go 3-0, and I come home with the winner pack, and I get the winner eagle. Never an axe biter. Usually a Black Lance. I have a whole bunch of Black Lances, and so that's why it was easy to just slip 2 of those in there. But overall, I'm happy with this deck. I'm going to keep tweaking it. I'm excited to see what previews we get for the upcoming set release. False Gods, I'm hoping there's just maybe 1 or 2 more good Fabled Beasts in there, or something that kind of ties this together even a little tighter. I'm happy with the ratios. 25 Fabled Beast Spirits. Our Turtle was usually picking up stuff that we could play. But I do want to actually kind of end on one note here, because a lot of opponents, they would see me play the Turtle, and then I would reveal Suppression, Burning Force, Alice, and it would go to the trash, and they would say something like, wow, that's why I don't like Turtle, or that's why, I don't trust it. You're going to lose out on your best cards or cards that you need. And that really, shocked me that players, even in this game, don't understand how these types of cards work, or they assume that I was supposed to draw that Burning Force that I really needed, and now Turtle ruined it for me. I don't see it that way at all. Turtle has a floor of being a 1000 BP spirit for 2 with 1 reduction that has a 50% chance of drawing me another spirit. For every time it does put Alice into the trash, there's an equal number of times where it moves an Ervita into the trash well, no, it'll never do that because I'll always draw the Ervita. There's an equal number of times where it will move something else out of the way so that next turn I do draw Alice. So if we assume that those cancel out, right, sometimes you're going to wish you had drawn that top card and sometimes you're going to wish you didn't draw that top card. Those cancel out. And so we are left with just how often does the turtle get me an extra card? And having a card that gets me an extra card literally 50% of the time over the course of 9 rounds, that is real card advantage, and that is still worth running. Now, in a different build of this deck, where the Fabled Beast count is 20 or 18 or 15 or something really low, and your turtle is missing more than he's hitting, I mean, you still have a shot at a free card, and you still are not really losing whatever went to the trash. I know it feels bad because you think I would have drawn Alice, I would have been able to play her, and that's exactly what I needed. But there's also times where he makes you discard the suppression you weren't going to play so that next turn you do pick up Alice. It's just a matter of perspective, and I was really surprised at how many people thought Turtle was bad because he might make you discard something that you would have otherwise drawn, and they did not recognize that he's always at least this good, and sometimes he is much better because he draws you the eagle or the hippo or lets you just pop off. But I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. That is my whole deck. I call it Pentan's Fables because we've got Pentan and then a bunch of Fabled Beasts. Good package for Magic. Kind of answered as many things as I could. I really didn't know what I was going to encounter in Ohio. Ended up being, I think, just one mono white, a bunch of purple, which kind of destroyed me every time because Baculus Cursed Dragon would just wipe my whole board out, and it was hard to kind of recover from that. But otherwise, I liked my chances in just about every game. They all felt close. I usually won the mirror match. I think I had 3 yellow opponents. I won 2 out of the 3 of those. And I lost to Star Dragons just because I wasn't really ready for it. Nobody plays that anymore at my local store, and I had sideboard tech for it, but they still managed to pull off Nova and kill me anyway. But again, if I'd been a little better rested, a little better prepared, made some different choices, I think this deck could have done even better. But I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. And I know people said, I want to see more Battle Spirits content on Magic Arcanum. Well, here it is. If you like this, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!